Tonight's event is entitled Strange Image, and the poets are going to speak to this in their selections. And just like last night, they're going to begin by reading a poem of someone else's. I just want to remind everyone to turn their cell phones off. And again, I want to welcome our wonderful guests, both here tonight in the audience and who are streaming online through www.vc.edu/guestbookproject. And if you go onto the website, you can learn a lot more about the Guestbook Project. Professor Richard Carney is the founder and creator of it. Last night he gave us a brief overview of the scope and goal of the project, speaking to hospitality and hosting the stranger. This festival this evening is part of the ongoing graduate seminar, which had a March conference and concert. And we will have Noam Chomsky coming to speak with others next week. And we will also have a May conference, Phenomenologies of the Stranger. So please come on to the website, learn about what's going on, and feel free to come out and participate. Before I introduce the first poet, Henri, I wanted to begin by reading a poem of Wallace Stevens that I alluded to last night, called Tea at the Palace of Hoon. Not less, because in purple I descended the western day through what you called the loneliest air. Not less was I myself. What was the ointment sprinkled in my beard? What were the hymns that buzzed beside my ears? What was the sea whose tide swept through me there? Out of my mind the golden ointment rained, and my ears made the blowing hymns they heard. I was myself the compass of that sea. I was the world in which I walked, and what I saw or heard or felt came not but from myself. And there I found myself more truly and more strange. And now I'd like to introduce the first reader, Henri Cole. Henri Cole was born in Japan in 1956 and raised in Virginia. He received his BA from the College of William and Mary and his master's from the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee and an MFA at Columbia University. His volumes of poetry include Blackbird and Wolf, his most recent collection, the 2008 recipient of the Lenore Marshall Poetry Prize, Middle Earth, which received the 2004 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award, The Visible Man, The Look of Things, The Zoo Wheel of Knowledge, and The Marble Queen. Cole's awards and honors include the Berlin Prize of the American Academy in Berlin, and the Rome Prize in Literature from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and the Amy Lowell Poetry Tanning Prize. He is the recipient of fellowships from the Camarago Foundation in Cassis, France, the Ingram Merrill Foundation, and the National Endowment for the Arts. From 1982 until 1988, Cole was executive director of the Academy of American Poets. Since then, he has held many teaching positions and various artists in residencies at various institutions, including Smith College, Reed College, Brandeis, Columbia, Harvard, and Yale universities. He lives in Boston and currently is a professor at Ohio State University. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our first reader, Henri Cole.
Thank you. Let's see, I thought I would begin with the very beautiful Hopkins sonnet, To Seem the Stranger. Lies my lot, my life, but I've decided instead to read a poem by Deborah Diggs, a poet of my generation who died about 8 days ago unexpectedly and much too soon. Deborah and I were waiters, when I was 25, I'm 52 now, waiters together at Bread Loaf, and our first books were published at the same time, a long time ago. This is from her first book. It's actually a proof of her first book called Vesper Sparrows. It's called Orangutan Means orange man. Can everybody hear me? Okay. No. Let's see. Let me see. I should do this here. The oldest faces us, sidesteps his way along the inner cage edge, his beautiful long arms extended, his big hands open. He's begging, says a visitor, though he doesn't stop to pick up what he cannot catch, and what he can, he tosses back to us. He's showing off, says a visitor, and turns in sudden bored contempt, not to be compared with the orangutans. And I remember the dead assenting eyes of old men in depots who play for handouts, harmonicas, and combs. How once, when I tossed a quarter onto their filthy army blanket, one of them lifted his long coat to show me, angry, one leg bound from his knee against his thigh. I thought since then that late at night, both his good legs stretched out on a bare mattress, the ache must gratify the crime. I must have turned wearing the slouched, submissive grin of the human animal, the one I've learned to use on buses, in subways, when I've heard the European tunnels echo with street musicians playing Schumann, Mozart. And as I make my way through those corridors, once used as air raid shelters toward the right train home, glad to be going and at the same time trapped in the beauty of that flute or violin, I can't help thinking how, to stay alive in Belsen, the best musicians had to play on night and day, even as their families were herded past them. The train door closes, and I avoid my reflection, as though avoiding that terrible empathy that turns one suddenly into everyone's guardian. I've sat whole days with my babies, examining, as does the female here, their little bodies, picking off the dusty slough like sunburned skin left over from the womb, smoothing their hair, sleeping when they sleep, inhaling easily their strong, milky expulsions. It was that trance I moved from finally, as from a closed room into sunlight. But I was changed irrevocably. I recommend her work to those of you that don't know it. She was one of 10 children raised in Missouri, and her poems are very much in part remember that childhood in Missouri. Her father was a doctor and her mother a nurse. Let's see, I'm going to begin with a few poems from my book and then read some new poems. My most recent book is Blackbird and Wolf. I think the role of the poet has a special importance in part because of his or her status as an outsider and as a challenger of convention. So it seems perfectly natural to read in a program whose theme is the stranger or the strange or the estranged. I like to begin with my parents, as always. My mother was a French woman who came to this country when she was 20 and spent 50 years trying to be an American, and at the end of her life completely reverted to being a French woman. It's called Sycamores. I came from a place with a hole in it. My body, once its body, behind a beard of hair. And after I emerged, all dripping wet, heavy drops came out of my eyes, touching its face. I kissed its mouth, I bit it with my gums. I lay on it like a snail on a cup. My body, whatever its nature was, revealed to me by its body. I did not know I was powerless before a strange force. I did not know life cheats us. All I knew nestling my head in its soft throat pouch was a hard gem-like feeling burning through me, like limbs of burning sycamores, touching across some new barrier of touchability. My father grew up in the sandhills of North Carolina, and his parents were tenant farmers. They grew peaches and tobacco, and this poem sort of refers to that world. It's called Oil and Steel. My father lived in a dirty dish mausoleum, watching a portable black and white television, reading the Encyclopedia Britannica, which he preferred to modern fiction. One by one, his schnauzers died of liver disease, except the one that guarded his corpse, found holding a tumbler of Bushmills. Dead is dead, he would say, an anti-preacher. I took a plaid shirt from the bedroom closet and some motor oil, my inheritance. Once I saw him weep in a courtroom, neglected, needing nursing, this man who never showed me much affection, but gave me a knack for solitude, which has been mostly useful. This next poem is set in the Adirondacks. Sort of begins and ends in the Adirondacks with a little flashback, a little scene spliced into the middle of it. It's called Twilight. There's a black bear in the apple tree and he won't come down. I can hear him panting like an athlete. I can smell the stink of his body. Come down, black bear, can you hear me? The mind is the most interesting thing to me. Like the sudden death of the sun, it seems implausible that darkness will swallow it or that anything is lost forever there. Like a black bear in a fruit tree gulping up sour apples with dry, sucking sounds. Or like us at pier, somber and tired, making food from sunlight, you saying a word, me saying a word, trying hard, though things were disintegrating. Still, I wanted you, your lips on my neck, your postmodern sexuality. Forlorn and anonymous, I didn't want to be that. I could hear the great barking monsters of the lower waters calling me forward. You see, my mind takes me far, but my heart dreams of return. Black bear with pale pink tongue at the center of his face is turning his head like the face of Christ from life. Shaking the apple boughs, he is stronger than I am and seems so free of passion. No fear, no pain, no tenderness. I want to be that. Come down, black bear. I want to learn the faith of the indifferent. Many of these poems are sonnet length that I'm reading. They're not rhymed or even metered, but they're meant to have the sort of fractures and leaps and resolutions in them that the sonnet form permits. This next poem is one long sentence, so you have to sort of hang on for it to make any sense at all. It has two sort of plots. One is a plot that is in parentheses and describes maybe a 20-year journey. And then the other plot is just the fact of a duck crashing into a bedroom. And the poem is called Homosexuality. First I saw the round bill like a bud, then the sooty crested head with the vernal eyes, flickering, distressed. Then the peculiar long neck wrapping and unwrapping itself, like pity or love, when I removed the stovepipe cover of the bedroom chimney to free what was there, and a duck crashed into the room. I am here in this fallen state, hitting her face, bending her throat back, my love, my inborn turbid wanting, at large all night, backing away, gnawing at her own wing linings, the poison of my life, the beast, the wolf, leaping out the window, which I held open, now clear, sane, serene, before climbing back naked into bed with you. I think I'll read some new poems now. They haven't been read, so they're not tried and true. I hadn't even decided which I might read. I'll just be impulsive about it. This first one is called Quai aux Fleurs, which is just, you might say, a street of flowers along the riverside. I have two teenage nieces who have been after me to put them in a poem, so that's really what was the occasion for this poem. I finally figured out a way to do that in a meaningful way. I want to just keep on smearing butter and jam on toast with a blunt knife and licking foam from my espresso cup while listening to Lizzie and Tricia practice French. But I'm a realist. Even the songbirds have levels of mercury in their blood and feathers. Somewhere in the brightness against a wall, a soldier crouches, sand in his hair, juices dripping from his body. Here there is joy, like a hole with greenness coming out of it. But there night pushes against the cylinder of his gun. He probably has a knife too, in the presence of the incomprehensible, thrusting his belly to the ground, feeling the strangeness throb in his blood as he touches the scope to his cheek. This next poem I wrote after seeing a photograph in the New York Times. It's called Sleeping Soldiers. Grow old, buy a house, have a baby, love someone, Sometimes there are substitutions. An historical torque pulls us away. A dearest beloved in a harbor, trench, or house lies begging for morphine. Just fucking do it. The best place is in the neck. Run away, fight the power. Oh, she was a good girl. His daddy was enlisted. The apple don't fall far from the tree. After Operation South, the soldiers are sleeping now in various postures of weariness on an oriental carpet, knees tucked into their chests, arms touching one another, everything all interwoven like something abstract deep within us, a soul maybe, bare-knuckled, but delicate too, like a scissored-out black cameo held up to the light before it is cut deeper. I think I'll just read two more. Last summer up in the Adirondacks, I got to take care of a flock of hens. So that really was the occasion for this poem, which is just called Hens. It's good for the ego when I call and they come running, squawking and clucking, because it's feed time. And once again I can't resist picking up little Lazarus, an orange and white pullet I adore. Yes, yes, everything will be okay, I say to her glaring mongrel face. Come September, she'll begin to lay the blue-green eggs I love poached. God dooms the snake to taste nothing but the dust, and the hen to 4,000 or so ovulations. Poor Lazarus, last spring an intruder murdered her sisters and left her garroted in the coop. There's a way the wounded light up a dark rectangular space. Suffering becomes the universal theme. Too soft, and you'll be squeezed. Too hard, and you'll be broken. Even a hen knows this, posing on a manure pile, her body a stab of gold. And I'll finish with this poem called Car Wash. I love the iridescent tricolor slime that squirts all over my Honda in random yet purposeful patterns as I sit in the semi-dark of the touch-free car wash with you. Listening to the undercarriage blast, I think, love changes and will not be commanded. I smile at the long flesh-colored tentacles waving at us like passengers waving goodbye. Water isn't shaped like a river or ocean. It mists invisibly against metal and glass. In the corridor of green, unnatural lights, recalling the lunatic asylum, how can I defend myself against what I want? Lay your head in my lap. Touch me. Thank you.
Thank you, Henri. That was wonderful. Our second reader this evening is Jorie Graham. Jorie Graham was born in New York City in 1950. She's the daughter of a journalist and a sculptor. She was raised in Rome, Italy, and educated in French schools. Graham is the author of numerous collections of poetry, most recently Sea Change, Never, Swarm, and The Dream of the Unified Field, Selected Poems, which won the 1996 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. Graham has also edited 2 anthologies, Earth Took of Earth, 100 Great Poems of the English Language, and The Best American Poetry, 1990. Her many honors include a John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Fellowship and the Morton Dowen Zabel Award from the American Academy and Institute of Arts and Letters. She has taught at the University of Iowa's Writers Program and is currently the Boylston Professor of Rhetoric and Oratory at Harvard University. She served as a Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets from 1997 to 2003, and we are very honored to have her here this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jorie Graham.
Can you hear me in the back if I lean in, as just suggested? I'm going to read various different poems trying to address the theme of the evening. I'm going to start with a little haiku by Basho. And I'm going to try to talk about it a little bit. The haiku, actually, I could write it for you. The haiku goes, nobody there, a child asleep in the mosquito netting. I'm going to write it on the blackboard. Sorry, in. Well, obviously, it's just a translation, and it's supposed to be a small child. And what interests me about this poem, and I sort of wanted to take it as my touchstone for the evening's discussion of who the stranger might be. I think will become clear as I try to talk a little bit about the poem as I do the work that the poem asks me to do, which is the principal function of a haiku, which is to ask you to do a certain kind of work, to undergo it. I have to posit the infant swaddled in mosquito netting. And obviously I don't think I or you would, in the bowl of our imagination, put that child 30 feet away. We'd sort of put it in the near middle distance. And one of the things you feel immediately as you swaddle the child with the mosquito netting in the middle distance is the nobody there. There's nobody watching over it. There are no parents. There is a feeling in the human heart, hundreds of years later, reading this poem, of slight concern and worry. There's nobody there. There should be somebody there. Something could happen to the child. Already the fact that it's swaddled in mosquito netting indicates that there are dangers, and that one of the dangers, of course, is mosquitoes, but there are much larger dangers, and the first line of the poem tells you that. One of the things that you begin to feel is that actually, if something were to go wrong, you have the illusion that there is somebody there. You're there. You're the reader, but you're there. And then you realize, but actually, you're not there. But the more you look at the child and the more you peer into the bowl of the imagination's suggestion of the swaddled child, the more you feel its presence. And as one begins to undergo this poem, you begin to feel many things about it. One is the ways in which the act of gazing at this child becomes a kind of swaddling. In fact, you begin to notice that the retina itself, your own eye, is a kind of netting, and it's not unlike the optic nerve, like the mosquito netting, and it is swaddling the child and covering it with a kind of looking and gazing and concern. The feeling that you are both there and not there, that you are capable of summoning the child completely into imagination and capable of helping it should anything happen, interests me as the first step into the understanding of what the status is the stranger, that strange creature, the reader and the writer, in the presence of the witness of the strange image that the poem summons, which hundreds of years later is still sleeping there. And we are still standing there, both able to intervene imaginatively, but unable to actually reach out and touch. It's a very interesting distance. One of the things that you begin to notice as you continue to think about the poem is the child is asleep. So the child is also not there in some way, because the child is elsewhere in dream, possibly. And if the child is dreaming, the child has on the other side of the child, on the other side of the sleep, on that side of the child is its dream, or whatever life it enters into when it is not here in waking life. So on that side of the child is its dream, and on this side is what kind of dream? You, the reader, you, the witness. And there's a strange way in which the child itself, in its swaddling, becomes this winged thing with its dream on that side of its sleep, and you're witnessing on this side of its sleep, and you realize it's a kind of mosquito, it's a kind of insect with these strange wings. And that feeling, that uncanny feeling that you have, the more you stand in this poem, and the more you summon the child, and the more you feel, if you've had a child, that it is not okay. The light is touching the child, the day is touching the child, the night is touching the child, and there's nobody there. And that feeling of you're nobody, I'm nobody, who are you, says Dickinson. Are you nobody too? That nobody that we are as both the readers and as the writers of poems interests me. And I was going to follow this with I want to explore the idea in a couple of different ways. I found a poem that I wrote quite a few years ago in a book titled Materialism. And it's a poem that was based on a common image in American small-town life of a man praying before he cuts into a loaf of bread. You've probably seen it in many. It certainly in the 50s was one of those Norman Rockwell-type images on calendars. And I happen to have seen this image of this man sitting that I'm going to describe in the poem. I'm witnessing him praying before he, saying grace before he eats and cuts into this slice of bread. I'm witnessing him from where? I'm standing in a bar actually in Laramie, Wyoming, where this picture is up on the wall next to the Anheuser-Busch sign, which has got a little scene of a lake, and he's still sitting at this table saying grace, not yet having cut into the loaf of bread. I also, in this poem, had another stranger that I was trying to also bear witness to, and that's Milton. And in a strange, crazy way, this small poem is trying to use a simile that you'll see sort of takes over and becomes the second half of the long sentence that opens the poem, in which a tree emerges, I believe it's a birch tree, which is not in the poem. It's actually created by the imagination and is not there, but it becomes central to the occasion and activity of the poem. So my relationship to this common image, this artifact, this man, and what my role is as the person trying to read the image, describe the image, bear witness to it, and interact with it is one of two poems of my own that I'll read this evening. This is one of many poems in this book titled Notes on the Reality of the Self. You have to sort of try to track, like the poem goes places that are not in the poem, and it comes back to places that are not supposed to be in the poem. And I myself was kind of amazed that I had the chutzpah to try to do this. But then I realized how strange the position is of the stranger who is, I don't like that word witness, but it's a word that we often use in the act of authorship or presence in relation to something apparently absent, which one is compelled to make present. In the bake shop at one of the tables, there is a man about to eat his morning's slice who sits, hands folded, eyes closed, above the loaf still entire, and speaks inwardly huge, strange thoughts of thanks. The knife, a felled birch left overnight for tomorrow's work, on which the moonlight in the eyes of no one plays, gleaming, the knife sits awaiting the emptiness it will make appear, where all along there had been emptiness implied. Round him the room hums slightly. No, round him infinite spaces gnaw at his face. His hands are thick from work. The small hairs glow. The fresh-washed skin, freckled a bit with age, ripples where his fingers lace. His weight is on his elbows and carries through onto the imitation wood-grain tabletop. Nothing distracts. The loaf is a crucial landmark in the small landscape which is his place. A way to find the road back to the felled tree, even in moonlight, even if strong rains intervene and no moon or sunshine can get through. For days he hunted for the tree, found it. Now mist makes the most familiar turns implausible, and notches in skyline, timberline, friends, guides, suddenly silt in. Silence of a place known forever, then not known at all, never at all. Habit gone, yesterday and yesterday and yesterday. Beauty is the notch restored, the clump of evergreens beneath it recognized. 3 redbirds in them, and then 2 now, up and out, chasing the third, bursting the air all round like water when the monster's surfacing. All this is true. All this is huge and empty spaces, tapping his lids, his hands, legend, small whirling motes or sparks or seed inside the hollows, ears, palms, inside the skull, hands to his lips so briefly as he finishes, a kiss. Oh, glance, now that the eyes that open you open again. Hand moving out to lift the knife. What are you doing? Corridor, stairway, front door. I like reading in a Catholic school because there's so many things I don't have to explain. This is a different kind of relationship to the encounter with the other. It takes place in the background of this poem, in which the words St. Paul appear. Obviously, the encounter, the conversion on the road to Damascus is present underneath the poem, even though the poet James Wright is referring to St. Paul, near St. Paul, Minnesota. You will notice when God appears in the poem. You will notice when the Sioux Indian appears in the poem, and the encounter is between a white man and a man whose land was taken from him in its entirety, at a bus stop, on a road, on a journey in which a conversion takes place. It's an extraordinary relationship between two strangers. And one of the things that you want to think about, so I was going off the word monster in the last poem, is what is monstrous in this poem. The poem is titled Hook. There's a man in it who has a hook. Usually we think of that as monstrous. You have to think about when the verb, I think, hunting appears in the poem, the tradition of hunting and being hunted, and what hospitality is when strangers meet on a road, why Zeus, for example, is the god of hospitality, and how essential it is when strangers meet historically, literally, culturally, that certain transactions take place. So a poem with a lot going on behind it, which I think you will get. Hook. I was only a young man in those days. On that evening, the cold was so goddamned bitter, there was nothing. Nothing. I was in trouble with a woman, and there was nothing. Nothing there but me and dead snow. I stood on the street corner in Minneapolis, lashed this way and that. Wind rose from some pit, hunting me. Another bus to St. Paul would arrive in 3 hours if I was lucky. Then the young Sioux loomed beside me. His scars were just my age. Ain't got no bus here a long time, he said. You got enough money to get home on? What did they do to your hand? I answered. He raised up his hook into the terrible starlight and slashed the wind. Oh, that, he said? I had a bad time with a woman. Here, you take this. Did you ever feel a man hold 65 cents in a hook and place it gently into your freezing hand? I took it. It wasn't the money I needed, but I took it. I love the way the pit turns into the poem in that poem. And this gesture of James Wright, he always uses these American phrases like, you take this, which could be an act of violence. And he uses it inside out. The other poem I'm going to read encounters a different kind of stranger, again by James Wright. I think the most important strangers on the planet right now have their emissary in this poem as a blossoming pear tree, an incomprehensible stranger whom we could miss on our journey and accidentally kill and destroy the city-state of which we are, unfortunately, custodians. Beautiful, to a blossoming pear tree. Beautiful, natural blossoms. Pure, delicate body. You stand without trembling. Little mist of fallen starlight, perfect, beyond my reach. How I envy you. For if you could only listen, I would tell you something human. An old man appeared to me once in the unendurable snow. He had a singe of white beard on his face. He paused on a street in Minneapolis and stroked my face. "Give it to me," he begged. "I'll pay you anything." I flinched. Both terrified, we slunk away, each in his own way dodging the cruel darts of the cold. Beautiful, natural blossoms. How could you possibly worry or bother or care about the ashamed, hopeless old man? He was so near death, he was willing to take any love he could get, even at the risk of some mocking policeman or some cute young wiseacre smashing his dentures, perhaps leading him on to a dark place and there kicking him in the dead groin just for the fun of it. Young tree, unburdened by anything but your beautiful, natural blossoms and dew. The dark blood in my body drags me down with my brother. And I'll end on a villanelle by Victor Hugo. You should never give me the opportunity to read other people's poems, because I love to do best. So, hoping this will invite Mark to read some villanelles. This is in an anthology I did called Earth, Took of Earth, my 100, favorite poems. In the language, there was a cutoff date, a cutoff birth date. Mark had done this anthology first, and I read it, and I said, "Oh, you picked all the wrong poems. I know the right 100 poems. You didn't pick the right 100 poems." And he said, "Okay, you go for it." So since we have the same editor I had in those days, he said, "Okay." I said, "I'll give you the list in 3 weeks. No problem. I know what the 100, I can find them. I know them." It took me a year and a half of reading. I had to relearn everything. I knew nothing. It was extremely hard. I had to break the rules to get a poem in here by one Derek Walcott, a poem that I cannot read because I cannot possibly do his voice. But from the schooner flight that ends the book and is signal poem for the book. This is just about everyone's otherness and how we use language, names, words, memory, pattern, wonderful use of the villanelle, the ways in which every time you try to go forwards, you have to go backwards. Every time you think you've gotten away from the past, it comes back and hits you again in an altered form. Every time you think that, and what I love about this poem is the very, very ending, the last line I'll read, which is just such an extraordinary description of home movies in America. The word stammering comes in to sort of suggest the way in which in the 50s one watched home movies and the idea of the American picnic and how we were supposed to all be happy and what family life was like and what it is to have memories that will not go away, to which you are the stranger because you are no longer the person in the life who undertook those actions. You cannot go back, you cannot change them, you cannot undo them, and they never fade. So a lot of that is in this one amazing poem, The Freaks at Spurgeon Road Field. The dim boy claps because the others clap. Oh, I should say that Mark's anthology turned out to be much better. I used his anthology. Mine went out of print, his didn't. I just want to say that because I would have felt terrible sitting down not remembering that part of it. Adrian Rich wrote to me and said, "Why do you put all those little courtiers in there? Like, 15th century, what are all those guys doing in there?" So I've made a lot of mistakes. The freaks at Spurgeon Road Field. The dim boy claps because the others clap. The polite word, handicapped, is muttered in the stands. Isn't it wrong the way the mind moves back? One whole day I sit contrite, dirt, L.A., Union Station 46, sweating through last night. The dim boy claps because the others clap. Score 5-3, pitcher fading badly in the heat. Isn't it wrong to be or not be spastic? Isn't it wrong the way the mind moves back? I'm laughing at a neighbor girl beaten to scream by a savage father, and I'm ashamed to look. The dim boy claps because the others clap. The score is always close, the rally always short. I've left more wreckage than a quake. Isn't it wrong the way the mind moves back? The afflicted never cheer in unison. Isn't it wrong the way the mind moves back to stammering pastures where the picnic should have worked? The dim boy claps because the others clap. Thank you.
Thank you for that very much, Jorie. And I just want to remind people that Jorie Graham now has a website, www.joriegraham.com, and we invite you all to check that, as well as our people who are streaming online, where you can read her poems, a biography, and much more. Thank you, though, for that reading. It was wonderful. Our third and final reader this evening is Mark Strand. Mark Strand was born on Canada's Prince Edward Island in 1934. He is the author of numerous collections of poetry, including most recently New and Selected Poems, Man and Camel, Blizzard of One, which received the Pulitzer Prize for 1998, Dark Harbor, The Continuous Life, Selected Poems, Story of Our Lives, and Reasons for Moving. He has also published 2 books of prose, several volumes of translation of works by Rafael Alberti and Carlos Drummond, help me Mark here, Andrade, thank you, among others. Several monographs on contemporary artists. He's edited a number of volumes, 100 Great Poems of the 20th Century, the Golden Echo Anthology, The Best American Poetry 1991, and Another Republic, 17 European and South American writers, which he edited in 1976 with Charles Simic. His honors include the Balajan Prize, 3 grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, a National Institute of Arts and Letters Award, the 1974 Edgar Allan Poe Prize from the Academy of American Poets, a Rockefeller Foundation Award, as well as fellowships from the Academy of American Poets, the MacArthur Foundation, the Ingram Merrill Foundation. In 2009, I believe in May, Mark Strand will receive a gold medal from the Academy of Arts and Letters. He has served as Poet Laureate for the United States and is a former Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets. He currently teaches English and Comparative Literature at Columbia University in New York. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mark Strand.
Thank you very much. Before I read a few of my own poems, I'm going to read a poem of Robert Frost's called The Tuft of Flowers. There is a stranger in this poem, a thoughtful stranger who does something that establishes a rare kind of intimacy. I went to turn the grass once, after one who mowed it in the dew before the sun. The dew was gone that made his blade so keen before I came to view the leveled scene. I looked for him behind an aisle of trees. I listened for his whetstone on the breeze. But he had gone his way, the grass all mown, and I must be, as he had been, alone. As all must be, I said within my heart, whether they work together or apart. But as I said it, swift there passed me by on noiseless wing a bewildered butterfly, seeking with memories grown dim o'er night some resting flower of yesterday's delight. And once I marked his flight go round and round, as where some flower lay withering on the ground. And then he flew as far as I could see, and then on tremulous wing came back to me. I thought of questions that have no reply, and would have turned to toss the grass to dry. But he turned first, and led my eye to look at a tall tuft of flowers beside a brook. A leaping tongue of bloom the scythe had spared, beside a reedy brook the scythe had spared. I left my place to know them by their name, finding them butterfly weed when I came. The mower in the dew had loved them thus, by leaving them to flourish, not for us, nor yet to draw one thought of ours to him, but from sheer morning gladness at the brim. The butterfly and I had lit upon, nevertheless, a message from the dawn that made me hear the wakening birds around and hear his long scythe whispering to the ground, and feel a spirit kindred to my own, so that henceforth I worked no more alone, but glad with him. I worked as with his aid, and weary sought at noon with him the shade, and dreaming, as it were, held brotherly speech with one whose thought I had not hoped to reach. Men work together, I told him from the heart, whether they work together or apart. Jorie suggested I read a poem called The Marriage. I should say that the theme of the stranger is pervasive in my work, largely because I'm a stranger to myself. Or so it seems whenever I sit down to write. The Marriage. The wind comes from opposite poles, traveling slowly. She turns in the deep air. He walks in the clouds. She readies herself, shakes out her hair, makes up her eyes, smiles. The sun warms her teeth. The tip of her tongue moistens them. He brushes the dust from his suit and straightens his tie. He smokes. Soon they will meet. The wind carries them closer. They wave. Closer, closer. They embrace. She is making a bed. He is pulling off his pants. They marry and have a child. The wind carries them off in different directions. The wind is strong, he thinks, as he straightens his tie. I like this wind, she says, as she puts on her dress. The wind unfolds. The wind is everything to them. I'm going to read an elegy to my father, who is really a stranger to me. I thought I knew him a little when he was alive. But I certainly found out after he died that I didn't know him at all. Although this elegy was written when I thought I knew something about him. It's in 6 sections. 1, the empty body. The hands were yours, the arms were yours, but you were not there. The eyes were yours, but they were closed and would not open. The distant sun was there. The moon poised on the hill's white shoulder was there. The wind on Bedford Basin was there. The pale green light of winter was there. Your mouth was there, but you were not there. When somebody spoke, there was no answer. Clouds came down and buried the buildings along the water, and the water was silent. The gulls stared. The years, the hours that would not find you turned in the wrists of others. There was no pain. It had gone. There were no secrets. There was nothing to say. The shade scattered its ashes. The body was yours, but you were not there. The air shivered against its skin. The dark leaned into its eyes, but you were not there. 2, answers. Why did you travel? Because the house was cold. Why did you travel? Because it is what I have always done between sunset and sunrise. What did you wear? I wore a blue suit, a white shirt, yellow tie, and yellow socks. What did you wear? I wore nothing. A scarf of pain kept me warm. Who did you sleep with? I slept with a different woman each night. Who did you sleep with? I slept alone. I've always slept alone. Why did you lie to me? I always thought I told the truth. Why did you lie to me? Because the truth lies like nothing else, and I love the truth. Why are you going? Because nothing means much to me anymore. Why are you going? I don't know. I have never known. How long shall I wait for you? Do not wait for me. I am tired and I want to lie down. Are you tired and do you want to lie down? Yes, I am tired and I want to lie down. 3, you're dying. Nothing could stop you. Not the best day, not the quiet, not the ocean rocking. You went on with your dying. Not the trees under which you walked, not the trees that shaded you, not the doctor who warned you, the white-haired young doctor who saved you once. You went on with your dying. Nothing could stop you. Not your son, not your daughter who fed you and made you into a child again, not your son who thought you would live forever, not the wind that shook your lapels, not the stillness that offered itself to your motion, not your shoes that grew heavier, not your eyes that refused to look ahead. Nothing could stop you. You sat in your room and stared at the city and went on with your dying. You went to work and let the cold enter your clothes. You let blood seep into your socks. Your face turned white. Your voice cracked in two. You leaned on your cane, but nothing could stop you. Not your friends who gave you advice, not your son, not your daughter who watched you grow small, not fatigue that lived in your sighs, not your lungs that would fill with water, not your sleeves that carried the pain of your arms. Nothing could stop you. You went on with your dying. When you played with children, you went on with your dying. When you sat down to eat, when you woke up at night wet with tears, your body sobbing, you went on with your dying. Nothing could stop you. Not the past, not the future with its good weather, not the view from your window, the view of the graveyard, not the city, not the terrible city with its wooden buildings, not defeat, not success. You did nothing but go on with your dying. You put your watch to your ear. You felt yourself slipping. You lay on the bed. You folded your arms over your chest and you dreamed of the world without you, of the space under the trees, of the space in your room, of the spaces that would now be empty of you, and you went on with your dying. Nothing could stop you, not your breathing, not your life, not the life you wanted, not the life you had. Nothing could stop you. 4. Your shadow. You have your shadow. The places where you were have given it back. The hallways and bare lawns of the orphanage have given it back. The newsboys' home has given it back. The streets of New York have given it back. And so have the streets of Montreal. The rooms in Belen where lizards would snap at mosquitoes have given it back. The dark streets of Manaus and the damp streets of Rio have given it back. Mexico City, where you wanted to leave it, has given it back. And Halifax, where the harbor would wash its hands of you, has given it back. You have your shadow. The doorways you entered lifted your shadow from you, and when you went out, gave it back. You had your shadow. Even when you forgot your shadow, you found it again. It had been with you. Once in the country, the shade of a tree covered your shadow, and you were not known. Once in the country, you thought your shadow had been cast by somebody else. Your shadow said nothing. Your clothes carried your shadow inside. When you took them off, it spread like the dark of your past. And your words that float like leaves in an air that is lost in a place no one knows gave you back your shadow. Your friends gave you back your shadow. Your enemies gave you back your shadow. They said it was heavy and would cover your grave. When you died, your shadow slept at the mouth of the furnace and ate ashes for bread. It rejoiced among ruins. It watched while others slept. It shone like crystal among the tombs. It composed itself like air. It wanted to be like snow on water. It wanted to be nothing, but that was not possible. It came to my house. It sat on my shoulders. Your shadow is yours. I told it so. I said it was yours. I have carried it with me too long. I give it back. 5. Mourning. They mourn for you when you rise at midnight and the dew glitters on the stone of your cheeks. They mourn for you. They lead you back into the empty house. They carry the chairs and tables inside. They sit you down and teach you to breathe, and your breath burns. It burns the pine box, and the ashes fall like sunlight. They give you a book and tell you to read. They listen, and their eyes fill with tears. The women stroke your fingers. They comb the yellow back into your hair. They shave the frost from your beard. They knead your thighs. They dress you in fine clothes. They rub your hands to keep them warm. They feed you. They offer you money. They get on their knees and beg you not to die. When you rise at midnight, they mourn for you. They close their eyes and whisper your name over and over, but they cannot drag the buried light from your veins. Old man, rise and keep rising. It does no good. They mourn for you the way they can. In the sixth and last section, called the New Year, it is winter and the new year. Nobody knows you. Away from the stars, from the rain of light, you lie under the weather of stones. There is no thread to lead you back. Your friends doze in the dark of pleasure and cannot remember. Nobody knows you. You are the neighbor of nothing. You do not see the rain falling and the man walking away, the soiled wind blowing its ashes across the city. You do not see the sun dragging the moon like an echo. You do not see the bruised heart go up in flames. The skulls of the innocent turn into smoke. You do not see the scars of plenty, the eyes without light. It is over. It is winter and the new year. The meek are hauling their skins into heaven. The hopeless are suffering the cold with those who have nothing to hide. It is over, and nobody knows you. There is starlight drifting on the black water. There are stones in the sea no one has seen. There is a shore, and people are waiting, and nothing comes back, because it is over, because there is silence instead of a name, because it is winter and the new year. And read a poem for my old friend Derek Walcott, who's sitting here. A poem I dedicated to him quite a while ago. It's called The View. This is the place. The chairs are white. The table shines. The person sitting there stares at the waxen glow. The wind moves the air around repeatedly, as if to clear a space for me, he thinks. He's always been drawn to the weather of leave-taking, arranging itself so that grief, even the most intimate, might be read from a distance. A long shelf of cloud hangs above the open sea with the sun of no distinction sinking behind it, a mild version of the story which is told just once if true and always too late. The waitress brings his drink. which he holds against the waning light, but just for a moment. Its red reflection tints his shirt. Slowly the sky becomes darker. The wind relents. The view sublimes. The violet sweep of it seems in this effortless nightfall more than a reason for being there, for seeing it, seems itself a kind of happiness, as if that plain fact were enough and would last. I'll read two more poems. I had been a polar explorer. I had been a polar explorer in my youth and spent countless days and nights freezing in one blank place and then another. Eventually I quit my travels and stayed at home, and there grew within me a sudden excess of desire, as if a brilliant stream of light of the sort one sees within a diamond were passing through me. I filled page after page with visions of what I had witnessed, groaning seas of pack ice, giant glaciers, and the wind-swept white of icebergs. Then, with nothing more to say, I stopped and turned my sights on what was near. Almost at once, a man wearing a dark coat and broad-brimmed hat appeared under the trees in front of my house. The way he stared straight ahead and stood, not shifting his weight, letting his arms hang down at his side, made me think that I knew him. But when I raised my hand to say hello, he took a step back, turned away, and started to fade as longing fades until nothing is left of it. The last poem I'll read is called Man and Camel. On the eve of my 40th birthday, I sat on the porch having a smoke when out of the blue a man and a camel happened by. Neither uttered a sound at first, but as they drifted up the street and out of town, the two of them began to sing. Yet what they sang is still a mystery to me. The words were indistinct, and the tune too ornamental to recall. Into the desert they went, and as they went, their voices rose as one above the sifting sound of wind-blown sand. The wonder of their singing, its elusive blend of man and camel, seemed an ideal image for all uncommon couples. Was this the night that I had waited for so long? I wanted to believe it was, but just as they were vanishing, the man and camel ceased to sing and galloped back to town. They stood before my porch, staring up at me with beady eyes, and said, "You ruined it. You ruined it forever."
Thank you all for coming. The poets will be available to sign books now. As we conclude the reading, there's some books outside for you to buy and have them sign. They'll sit right up front here. Tomorrow we conclude the Poetry Festival with Adam Zagajewski, Lucy Brock-Broido, and Derek Walcott. Thank you for coming and have a very good evening. And thank you, everyone, again.